I remember the night as if it were etched into my very soul, a night when the mundane boundaries between sleep and waking life shattered into a maelstrom of terror. At first, it had all seemed so innocent. My girlfriend's soft murmurs in her sleep were, in the beginning, nothing more than whimsical phrases, nonsense words like, "The sky is folding," or "We need to raise the ground," uttered with a charm that made the night feel safe and cozy. We would wake with smiles, laughing over the absurdity of dreams that defied logic. But that night, as darkness deepened around us, those playful utterances twisted into something unholy. I lay awake a little longer than usual, reading by the feeble light of my bedside lamp. The gentle cadence of her slumbering words provided a backdrop to my thoughts. At some point, my eyes grew heavy, and I drifted into a fitful sleep, unaware of the malignant force slowly creeping into our haven. In the fragile twilight between dreams and reality, I awoke abruptly to an eerie sound, a voice that belonged neither to sleep nor to waking life, but to a presence that had invaded the quiet of our bedroom. I turned slowly to find her there, face to face with mine, yet her eyes were no longer the warm, soulful windows to her heart. They were wide, unblinking, and strangely vacant, as if they stared into an endless void behind them. In that instant, the familiar contours of her face contorted into something almost monstrous. The softness in her expression had been replaced by an unsettling rigidity, and her voice, when it came, was deep and sonorous in a way that was not her own. The word "dearie" slipped from her lips, a word that belonged to a distant, archaic past, and it sent a cold shiver down my spine. I tried to shake off the dread that was pooling in my chest, attempting to reassure myself that perhaps it was a trick of sleep. But the terror escalated rapidly. As I watched her, I noticed her gaze flicking around the room in a predatory manner, as though it sought something hidden in the shadows. Her hands, once delicate and reassuring in their caresses, now moved with a disjointed and erratic precision, their motions resembling a marionette manipulated by a cruel puppeteer. The transformation was so complete, so horrifyingly unnatural, that I felt compelled to retreat. I bolted from the bed, my heart hammering against my ribs as I grasped a water bottle like a lifeline. Before I could even process the surreal scene unfolding before me, she spoke again, a sound that rumbled like distant thunder. The words were a promise of violence, a warning that every step I took away from the door would be met with unspeakable cruelty. In that moment, with adrenaline surging through my veins, I unscrewed the cap and splashed her with water, hoping to break the dark enchantment. For a fleeting heartbeat, the creature that had taken residence in her seemed to falter, and her eyes drooped in an eerie semblance of sleep. I took that pause to escape, fleeing to the cold refuge of the living room, where I convinced myself I could find safety on the couch. Yet, as the early hours of the morning bled into the day, I discovered that safety was only an illusion. The demon that had invaded her sleep was patient and relentless, returning in whispers and demands even as I attempted to carry on with the day. The insidious voice, now intermingled with the familiar cadence of my girlfriend's own tone, coaxed me back to the bedroom, promising companionship and comfort that I knew was tainted by malice. It was then that I realized I was caught in a nightmare that defied rationality, a horror that had seeped into the very fabric of our lives. Matters grew ever more grotesque as the night unfurled its dark tapestry. Amid the chaos, I found myself wrestling not only with the possessed body of the woman I loved, but also with the supernatural corruption that had spread to our pet cat. The once innocuous creature now bore the marks of the curse, a pair of bloodshot, unsettling eyes, and limbs that seemed unnaturally long and sinuous. Its voice, when it emerged, was a guttural echo of the same demonic timbre, delivering threats that chilled me to the core. I could hardly fathom that the same force controlling my girlfriend had now twisted our beloved pet into a vessel of malevolence. Every corner of our home became a stage for the macabre. I watched in horror as slimy tendrils of a black, oily substance dripped from surfaces, as if the walls themselves were crying out in despair. The bed, once a symbol of intimacy and safety, was transformed into a nest of corruption, a grim testament to the evil that had invaded our lives. I recalled the soft purrs and gentle presence of our cat from nights past, and now, every distorted, grotesque movement of its possessed form reminded me of the nightmarish betrayal of trust by the very ones I loved. In a desperate bid to reclaim our home from the encroaching darkness, I reached out to an exorcist, a gaunt, tattooed figure whose eyes held a fierce determination and whose hands trembled not from fear, but from an understanding of the ancient, unholy rites that lay ahead. He arrived in the twilight hours, carrying with him relics and texts that bore cryptic symbols and unspeakable lore. The Bible he clutched was not a sacred text, as I once knew it, but a compendium of arcane inscriptions and demonic sigils, a tool honed for battling forces that defied earthly understanding. Together, we embarked on a nightmarish crusade against the evil that had seized my girlfriend's body. The exorcist's voice rose in fervent staccato prayers, his words intermingling with the thunderous clamor of my pounding heart. We moved cautiously through the corridors of our once happy home, now a labyrinth of horror, as we attempted to subdue the relentless, possessed form that lurked behind the closed door of our bedroom. Each step was a battle, a desperate struggle between the remnants of humanity and the all-consuming darkness that threatened to engulf us entirely. The battle reached a fever pitch when the possessed form, with a force that defied all human strength, lunged forward. I could barely react as her hand, once a tender caress, became an instrument of unspeakable violence. In a moment of ghastly inevitability, the demonic force inflicted upon her the most horrifying act of all. It severed her hand with a broken shard of glass, the splintered flesh splattering onto the floor in a slow, revolting cascade of blood and oily residue. The sound of that severance echoed in the room like a death knell, a harbinger of the abomination that now roamed free. As I stood there, paralyzed by shock and revulsion, the exorcist worked with grim determination. He maneuvered her into the shower, his hands steady despite the swirling terror, as streams of water cascaded over her body, a temporary reprieve from the demonic force that clung so desperately to her soul. But even that sanctuary was transient, for the evil was not so easily purged. In the ensuing struggle, every moment was a fight against time and terror, every breath a stolen gasp of fear. Outside the confines of the immediate battle, another horror unfolded. The possessed cat, now a grotesque mimic of its former self, slithered and hissed its threats in a voice that belonged to an ancient, malevolent spirit. Its unholy presence culminated in a nightmarish scene as it attacked the exorcist with a ferocity that defied reason, its limbs twisting like serpents in the dim light. I intervened with a desperate act of salvation, using the only weapon I had at hand, a bottle of water, to neutralize the creature. The momentary stillness that followed was a brief, deceptive lull in the relentless storm of chaos. Yet, as if the universe itself reveled in our suffering, the nightmare escalated once more. A severed hand, the remnant of my girlfriend's flesh, still adorned with the ring that once symbolized love, came alive, crawling across the floor with a disturbing determination. It moved with a mind of its own, leaving a trail of viscous slime in its wake as it sought to reclaim its sinister dominion over our lives. I chased it through the darkened hallways, my every step a frantic dance on the razor's edge between hope and despair. The hand's malevolence culminated in a final horrifying act as it pounced from behind the refrigerator, its grip viciously clamping onto my face, squeezing with an unyielding grip that threatened to erase my sanity. In that moment, as water mixed with blood and terror on my skin, I fought back with every ounce of strength I could muster, hurling the monstrous appendage against the wall and washing away its unholy residue. The battle raged on, a desperate struggle against a tide of demonic forces that sought to reclaim everything I held dear. By the time dawn crept through the battered windows, the house was a ruin of shattered memories and unspeakable horror. The exorcist, his face marred by both determination and the blood of his trials, declared that the demon had been expelled. Yet, even as he spoke, I could see the lingering shadows in my girlfriend's eyes, a haunting reminder that the evil, though momentarily vanquished, had left its mark upon her soul. She lay there, restrained and broken, a wounded vessel of the horror that had nearly consumed us both. As I cradled her in the early light, the remnants of our former life blurred into a nightmarish haze. Every heartbeat, every labored breath, echoed with the knowledge that nothing would ever be the same. The night had not only stripped us of our innocence, but had also indelibly inscribed its terror into the very walls of our home, into the memories of our love. And as I looked into her eyes, one moment clear and filled with sorrow, the next moment clouded with that demonic yellow glow, I knew that the nightmare was far from over. In the quiet aftermath, as the exorcist gathered his strange, cursed relics and prepared to depart, I was left with a profound, unsettling truth. Sometimes the darkest horrors do not leave with the night. They linger in the corners of our minds, in the silent spaces between heartbeats, reminding us that even the most cherished of dreams can, in an instant, be transformed into an endless, living nightmare.